The air crackled with an electric tension, a palpable energy that seemed to dance in the flickering light of the chandelier. It was the kind of tension that only money and secrets could buy, a heady mix of power and intrigue that hung in the air like a fine mist. We were at the pinnacle of society, or so it seemed, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and influence. Towering marble columns dripping with gold leaf greeted us at the entrance, a testament to the opulence that awaited within. Crystal chandeliers worth more than my entire existence cast shimmering, fragmented light across the opulent ballroom, creating a kaleidoscope of reflections on the marble floors. I smoothed down the silk of my dress, a nervous habit I couldn't seem to shake, my fingers tracing the delicate fabric as if seeking comfort. The music swelled, a waltz, I think, its lilting melody weaving through the conversations and laughter. It felt strangely out of place, a beautiful anachronism in a room full of modern-day aristocrats. My date, the infuriatingly handsome and enigmatic Julian, squeezed my hand reassuringly, or was it possessively? His grip was firm, almost too firm. I could never be quite sure with him. His eyes, intense and unreadable, always seemed to be hiding something. His eyes, however, were glacial, betraying the warmth of his touch. They scanned the room, taking in every minute detail, every hushed conversation, every furtive glance. They scanned the room, taking in every minute detail, every hushed conversation, every furtive glance, as if cataloguing secrets for future use. He was a hunter amongst gazelles, and I, unfortunately, was his unwilling accomplice, dragged along in his wake. "Relax, darling," he murmured, his voice a low caress in the cacophony of the room. His words were meant to soothe, but they only heightened my unease. "You're wound tighter than a piano wire," he observed, his tone a mix of amusement and concern. His words did little to ease the knot of apprehension twisting in my stomach. I could feel the tension in my clenched fists, the unease that refused to dissipate. There was something about this party, this gathering of the city's elite, that set my teeth on edge. The smiles were too bright, the laughter too forced. The air itself felt heavy, suffocating, like the silence before a storm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the sense of impending doom lingered. "Business," he'd said, his lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a smile that held secrets, a smile that promised more than it revealed. "Just a bit of business," he repeated, as if that explained everything, but I knew better. That was all I could pry out of him. Business, a word that could mean anything and nothing at the same time. What kind of business thrived in this world of champagne wishes and caviar dreams? A world where appearances were everything. What secrets hid behind the carefully crafted smiles and the glittering facades? Each smile seemed to hold a story, each glance a hidden agenda. I longed to escape the stifling atmosphere, to breathe in the fresh air of uncertainty. But I was tethered to Julian, both literally and figuratively. His presence was a constant reminder of the life I was trapped in. He moved through the crowd with an almost predatory grace, his hand never leaving the small of my back. It was a possessive gesture, one that spoke volumes about our relationship. We were a tableau of wealth and success, a perfectly matched couple on the surface, but appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the veneer of normalcy, a different story unfolded. A story of whispered secrets and hidden tensions. A story whispered in the shadows, concealed behind polite smiles and empty pleasantries. Every conversation seemed to have an undercurrent of something unsaid. "Don't you just love these things?" A woman trilled beside me, her voice dripping with false cheer. Her enthusiasm felt forced, almost rehearsed. Her diamonds, the size of grapes, sparkled malevolently under the chandelier's glow. They were as ostentatious as her demeanor. I plastered on a smile, mirroring her insincerity. It was a game we all played, a dance of deception. "Oh, absolutely," I lied, my voice breathy and light. The words felt hollow but necessary. "The company is simply divine," I echoed, knowing full well that the truth was far more complicated. My gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape, an ally, anything familiar in this sea of strangers. The opulence of the ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors, only heightened my sense of isolation. But the faces swam before me, a blur of Botox and boredom. Each expression seemed more vacant than the last. as if the wealth and luxury had drained the life out of them. Their eyes, however, were sharp, calculating, taking in every detail, every flaw. It was as if they were all part of some unspoken competition, each one trying to outdo the other in a game of appearances. I felt like a butterfly pinned beneath a microscope, my every move scrutinized and dissected. The weight of their judgment was almost palpable, pressing down on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. The mask, the one I'd so carefully constructed, threatened to crack. I could feel the facade slipping, the carefully curated image I had built for this world starting to crumble. The weight of Julian's secrets, the suffocating atmosphere of the party, the sheer falseness of it all, pressed down on me. It was as if the very air was conspiring to reveal the truth I'd tried so hard to hide. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing fresh air, and made my escape. The words felt foreign on my tongue, a flimsy excuse that I hoped would go unquestioned. The hallway was dimly lit, a welcome reprieve from the ballroom's oppressive grandeur. The soft lighting and quiet ambience provided a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left behind. I leaned against the cool marble wall, willing my heart to stop its frantic drumming. The cold surface was a small comfort, grounding me in the midst of my turmoil. What was Julian involved in? Why had he brought me here? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more troubling than the last. I didn't want answers. I wanted to go home, to curl up on the couch with a good book and pretend this night never happened. The comfort of my own space seemed like a distant dream, a sanctuary I could no longer reach. But I knew that wasn't an option. I was in too deep. The realization hit me like a cold wave, and I knew I had to find a way to navigate this treacherous world, no matter the cost. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my spine and reapplied my lipstick, a splash of crimson in the dimly lit hallway. I was a fool to think I could escape this world, this life that Julian had drawn me into. It clung to me like a second skin, seductive and dangerous in equal measure. As I rejoined the throng, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Eyes followed my every move, assessing, judging. These people were sharks, circling in their gilded tank, and I was a small fish, out of my depth and swimming against the tide. The music changed, morphing into a sultry tango. Couples moved together, their bodies entwined, their movements a carefully choreographed dance of power and desire. I watched them, their faces hidden in the shadows, their true intentions veiled behind practiced smiles. Every conversation felt like a transaction, every interaction a carefully calculated move in a high-stakes game I didn't understand. "You look like you could use a drink." The voice slithered into my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. He was tall, imposing, with eyes as dark and fathomless as the night sky. This was Mark, the man who held court in this palace of secrets. "Mark," I acknowledged, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They held a strange intensity, a mixture of amusement and something colder. Something that sent a chill down my spine. It was the look of a predator sizing up its prey. "Julian tells me you're new to all this," he said, his voice a low purr. "Don't worry, darling. You'll learn soon enough." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I wanted to step back, to put some distance between us, but something held me rooted to the spot. Fear, perhaps, or maybe a morbid curiosity. "I'm sure I will," I managed, forcing a smile onto my lips. The music swelled again, a waltz this time, its romantic melody a stark contrast to the tension thrumming between us. Mark extended his hand, his eyes never leaving mine. "May I have this dance?" I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to refuse, but to do so would be to court disaster. So, with a resigned sigh, I placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, almost bruising. He led me onto the dance floor, his movements fluid and controlled. "Julian seems to have taken quite an interest in you," he said, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "He doesn't usually bring such lovely creatures to these little gatherings. He simply adores my company," I parried, injecting a note of playful indifference into my voice. But my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic tattoo against his chest. His gaze was unwavering, dissecting as if he could see right through my carefully constructed facade. "Oh, I'm sure he does," he chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "But Julian always has an ulterior motive, wouldn't you agree?" His words struck a chord, echoing the doubts that had been swirling in my mind. What was Julian's game? And what part did I play in it? I wanted to demand answers, to confront him with the truth, but I knew better than to cause a scene. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Julian is nothing, if not straightforward." Mark's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Straightforward? My dear, you have much to learn about our dear Julian." His words hung in the air, heavy with insinuation. He was playing with me, toying with me like a cat with a mouse. But why? What was the purpose of this charade? The music stopped, and I took a step back, desperate to escape his suffocating presence. But his hand remained on my waist, a possessive brand that sent shivers down my spine. "Don't look so frightened, darling," he murmured, his voice a low purr. "It's all a game, isn't it? And you, my dear, are playing it rather well." Before I could respond, Julian materialized at my side, his expression unreadable. He placed a hand on my back, his fingers digging into my skin, a silent warning. "Mark," he greeted, his voice smooth as silk. "Enjoying the festivities?" "Immensely," Mark replied, his eyes flickering between us, "especially the company." The tension crackled between them, thick and suffocating. I felt like a pawn caught in their game, a game whose rules I didn't understand and whose stakes were terrifyingly high. "I believe this dance is over," Julian said, his voice laced with steel. He steered me away, his grip on my arm unrelenting. I glanced back over my shoulder to see Mark watching us, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. As we made our way through the opulent ballroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into a dangerous game. A game where the stakes were high, the players ruthless, and the truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was trapped in a web of secrets and lies, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning.